Hi, welcome back to Little Steps, Big Gains. My name is Elizabeth. Thank you for coming to sit down and listen to this video that has some tips for tremors with eating. Now, I am cheating and using my handout so I don't forget anything, but I've included the handout in the description section. And while this channel was initially created for 30-day challenges, I've received some requests for education, and that is why I'm providing this. Now, throughout the years, when it comes time for tremors, I have created a list that has come in handy for certain individuals. But tremors, some of these may work for you and they may not. I just want to provide these ideas and tips that I have found useful. So the first thing on the list is using proximal stabilization. And what I mean by that is when I reach, every joint has a degree of freedom to it. And so if I'm reaching to eat or to do a task, grabbing something from the cabinet, I have all these degrees of freedom that could possibly interfere with my motor planning. So a lot of times I have people reduce that. You know what? Tuck the elbow, because then the shoulder is not moving all over the place. And then when it comes time for the elbow, maybe you need to stabilize it on something. For the wrist, I actually have found wrist supports, including wrist cock-up splints, to be helpful, because putting that on while you're eating or doing just a task, not throughout the day, actually has helped stabilize the wrist for tremors as well. That is what I have found useful. So here's another example. I have a young guy with MS who is really limited by his tremors. And so for him, what we did with brushing his teeth. So we actually changed his toothbrush to an electric toothbrush, and he would, next to his sink was a wall, and he would lean against the wall on the side and then go ahead and bring his toothbrush along the wall and brush his teeth that way, because it reduced that degree of freedom for him. For him also, we used an electric toothpaste dispenser where he just put it underneath and then it dispensed for him, because we were really struggling with the caps and opening and closing. So that is one tip I have found helpful, is reducing the degrees of freedom by, tucking and stabilizing. And that goes with the next one on your list, stabilizing the arm. Hand-over-hand techniques have worked with certain individuals. Parkinson's, for example, actually starts on one side of the body, which is not something I knew throughout my whole career. And so I've had individuals, if it starts on the right side and that's the side that's more impaired, I've had individuals use the left hand to stabilize it a little bit and help. That has come in handy for some individuals. Another big thing I recommend is to avoid multitasking. And this comes into play when there's TV in the background or having conversations. And having conversations in general with motor planning can really mess us up, because our brain can't do two things at once. And this will come in handy, or not in handy, come to surface when I talk about freezing of gait, because I have a video for that too, where as soon as we're distracted by something, our brain can't do two things at once, and that might exacerbate the tremors. Another big thing that I found exacerbates tremors is stress and frustration. So if you're frustrated with something, I recommend doing some deep breathing exercises first. Or if you're frustrated with what's going on during your eating or your task because of your tremors or these tremors, then maybe taking a break with deep breathing instead of trying to push through it. That is a big thing, and that'll come in when I talk about freezing of gait, where we're frozen and we try to push and it actually makes it worse. And the best thing you can do is actually stop. Take a deep breath in. Okay, relax. And when we do the freezing, that's when we're going to shift and step. But with tremors, taking those breaks if you're frustrated. Medications on a timely manner. Talk to your neurologist about when to take your medication. But a lot of times when I've worked with neurologists and in my training, they have recommended taking medications before eating and not after, because the protein can block the neurotransmitters the receptors for dopamine, making the medication less effective. Talk to your neurologist about that. Don't take my advice or my training here, but talk to him overall about the timing of your medications and follow that timing. Even if you need something like a reminder on your phone, a reminder another way, there's apps for those things, but follow the timing of your medications. Another thing that's often recommended is adaptive equipment. Now, a big recommendation is weighted silverware, and I'm going to be honest, I haven't had the best luck with it. You could try it, but I haven't had the best luck. Sometimes therapists, and I've seen some luck with actually weighted wrist weights. Try it. I've seen that to become useful for some individuals because of the input it provides. Not to say these are throw them in the garbage, but they are on the list because I have heard them as recommendations before. Having silverware with wider grips on it that you can purchase, or getting these foam tubes that you can cut and put over your surface, even like a toothbrush or a knife or something, that can come in handy as well. Speaking of the word knife, rocker knives come in really handy for cutting up food, because now it's this, you can Google it as well, but now it's called a rocker knife instead of cutting. That's an option as well here. So those are a few things. When it comes time for soups and cereals, I recommend using a spoon that has a wide ladle in it that and is deep. If you can, like Japanese spoon noodles. You like that? Japanese spoon noodles? Japanese spoons have those ladles which are deeper. There are also special devices that can detect tremors and stabilize it. And Liftware is one of those, but you can Google. I have heard of really good reviews from those. FYI, something that you can always look into. Lipped plates, dice them, that keeps plates from moving. Now, here's another recommendation that I get quite a bit is adding lids with straws. And this sounds great, and it actually is wonderful for some people, but I would recommend consulting with the physician, because if you have anything like swallowing deficits and it influences the timing between the sucking and the fact that you get all of this fluid at once, so you really have to have good timing of those swallowing muscles, because what can happen if you don't have the timing there is the liquid can go into the lungs instead of the stomach, and then you can get what's called pneumonia. Even if you don't cough, that's a big thing. That's called silent aspiration. And that's something I learned in my early career is just because individuals or you're not coughing doesn't mean you're not aspirating where that fluid's going into the lungs. So that's not a recommendation I provide for everyone. I really consult with a speech therapist before I just jump in on that. But either way, having, they do have cups with lids on it and then a little spout that I also have found handy. And I'm doing this motion because I've also found it helpful with cups that have two handles on each side. And then these individuals actually can kind of push their hands together, tuck their elbows, and I have found that to be helpful for drinking, something to check out. Here's an unusual one I've learned, finger flicking. Okay. Wait to see it before you make your assumption there. But this is what I learned through Lsteps.Bgains in my training, is to take that hand and forcefully open and flick it and close. And I honestly thought this was all like Looney Toony until I tried it with somebody. And in the Lsteps.Bgains training, they actually did it with somebody buttoning up a shirt. They had this individual try to button and he really struggled. And then they had him finger flick 10 times. And then he rebuttons, and I was shocked at how steady he was. So of course you watch this on a video supported by Lsteps.Bgains, and I'm thinking, I don't know about this. So here I am with a resident trying to text on his phone. And I said, hey buddy, let's try this weird thing. Hang in there with me. I want you to take your hands and I want you to flick them for me. Let's try this. We did 10 finger flicks. He took that phone, is so steady, texted with it. It was amazing. And then he started to do it during eating. He would finger flick and then do some of his eating, and the tremors do return. This isn't like a permanent thing. They return, but then he would stop and finger flick again. And I'd watch him do it under the table because, in the dining room, it's kind of weird to be doing this at everybody, right, while we're eating. So he would put his hands under the table, and I'd watch him even without me recommending it because he saw the value of it. And he started doing that throughout his day. Drinking some water in the middle of watching a TV show, he would finger flick and then he would drink. Something to try. Obviously, it's benign. Give it a shot. That's something I learned and I was kind of surprised about. Finger foods might be easier instead of, using forks and knives and things like that. You can also use, I've found, heard the recommendation of using something like mashed potatoes to stick to foods and adhere to them as well. Hey, give it a shot. I had mentioned stabilizing the wrist by splinting. I found that to be helpful using a wrist cock-up splint, which has like more of a firm surface on the wrist there, and it has provided some stability with residents who put it on just for eating or for certain tasks where they need that stability, because it provides that proximal means closest to the body, stabilization, which is stability. I have found that to be helpful. You can find those at Walgreens, Walmart, and you know what? Try it. And I probably shouldn't say this on camera, but you can return it if it doesn't work. Don't get food on it. But what I mean is just to try once or twice and see if it works. One of my courses talked about exploring forearm cooling, where they put ice packs on their forearms ahead of time. I'll be honest, I haven't really experienced or really implemented this quite a bit, but I've read about it. It could be something to explore. Other therapists have recommended exercise ahead of time, even jumping on like an arm ergometer, which is an arm bike ahead of time, kind of fatiguing the muscles a little bit, and then eating. Something, I don't know, I put it on the list, right? Elevating feeding surfaces up high instead of down low because of the amount of distance that you're going now from your plate or your food up to your mouth. Something to think about. And then I put on here, moving the body and the head as opposed to the lower limb can be helpful as well. So now instead of my hand making all that distance up to my mouth, kind of coming down and coming closer to that surface to reduce that distance, that is an option as well, if possible. So this is that video that was requested for tips on eating with tremors. Of course, some of these tips apply to other places, like I mentioned, brushing teeth and grabbing items and things like that. So I hope that you'll try a few tips, share it. That's the big thing about this channel. Share it with somebody that you might think would benefit. And just thank you for sitting down and joining me. I have more educational videos coming, so please stay tuned, subscribe, and the big thing is share. Thanks so much for coming. Little steps every day together, we can make some big gains.